Oops, I have to agree that I'm being recorded.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay.
Welcome. We're good. We're good to go. Hi guys, I'm Michelle Carpenter and welcome to Keeping It Real today. As you are well aware, I can be off the charts, zany, wacky, weird, and I incredibly blessed at the same time. I always great start, Scott. Yeah, yeah. I
Am
know,
I
good luck.
safe?
I hope you were warned. But today, as always, I have the most incredible guests, and I'm going to read a little bit about Dr. Scott Taylor, and he is the president of the Expanded Awareness Institute, EAI. Helps people interested in near death and share death experiences. They explore what that experience means to them and to our culture as a whole. Scott's gift is the ability to make the exploration, I love this, the exploration of the non physical universe accessible to the curious. Scott is also an author and voice of 6 best selling CDs of guided meditations on near death experiences in his Into the Light series. He is a spiritual teacher, speaker, and researcher on near death experiences. Welcome to Keeping It Real, Scott.
Thank you, Michelle. I have been looking forward to this, so we're going to have fun.
I think we're going to have great fun. We've already kicked off, and it's always wonderful to sort of get to know somebody before I push record. But you have such a great story to share. So, would you like to kickstart and share with us where you started today it's called the awakening or waking up, or what was it to you, your near-death experience?
So, technically, it was a shared death experience. It happened in 1981. I was in love with a woman. Her name was Mary Frances Randall. And she and her son Nolan had been out sailing in southern Minnesota. Beautiful day, beautiful lake. And on their way home, they were involved in a horrific car accident. And Mary Fran was killed outright. And Nolan sustained a mortal head wound. And he was immediately taken to Rochester, the Mayo system, and he received this terrific care. But it was an injury that his body just couldn't stand. It took him 6 days to make his transition, and that becomes important because all of the Mary Fran was one of 8. And so all of her siblings had a chance to converge on St. Mary's Hospital in Rochester and be there and hold vigil with Nolan. And so it got to be quite a crew, because it was, brothers and siblings and spouses and boyfriends and girlfriends and neighbors and friends and aunts and uncles and grandparents, and that was just her side of the family, so there's like mine too. So there were a lot of us there. And what we decided to do as a group, because Nolan's hospital room wasn't that big and it couldn't hold 40-50 people. I mean, that'd be silly anyway. So we decided that 2 of us would go in every 2 hours and we would just be with Nolan. Nolan was in a coma. He never came out of the coma. But the nurses were really clear with us that, the last sense to go is the sense of hearing. And so it was important for us to be there and to talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so my shift was from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning of the 6th day. And I went into with Janny, which was Mary Fran's oldest sister. And I had Nolan's favorite storybook. And we came in and we read him stories and we told him about the things that were happening in the hospital. And as it turned out, his uncles had gone throughout the Mayo health system that night about midnight, and they'd stolen all the cushions off the off the couches in the reception rooms, and then brought them back to the our little waiting room and put them on the floor so they could get some decent rest while we were holding vigil. So we're telling them stories about who's there and what's going on, and some of it's lighthearted and some of it's um, um, emotional
Sure.
and comforting, and we're trying to. But Nolan had just turned 7, so
Oh,
it's how do you explain things to him in a way that he can get it, that he can understand. And about 4:45, um, Janie looks at me and she says, "Scott, let's check this." And she goes to the end of the bed and picks up his chart, and looks at the chart, and then looks up at the myriad of monitors that were surrounding his bed. And she is a trained nurse, also trained in trauma care. So this is, she's right at home here. And what she wound up doing was just holding her hand out to me and saying, yeah, "Scott, the trend is clear. It's time for us to say goodbye."
mm,
So the two of us pulled up chairs next to Nolan's head, and we told him that we were so proud of him, that he had been such a brave boy, that he had fought so hard to be with us,
mm-hmm.
and that if his mother should come, remembering that she died 6 days before,
Yes.
um, that if his mother should come, that he should go with her. If she asked him, to go with her, that would be the right thing to do.
Wow.
That um, it would be good to be with his mother. And we told him we loved him, and then our time is up, and we left as the next shift came in. Well, it wasn't 45 minutes later that the nurse on the floor came and told us that his progression was now accelerating, and that it wouldn't be long now. So we all of us filed into this little hospital room, and as luck would have it, when I got in, I mean, it was already 4 deep around the bed. So I didn't see much point in just standing that far back. So I wound up sitting on the windowsill next to Mary Fran's youngest brother, Willie, and we just waited. It's just, there isn't much to do
Mm-hmm.
except watch the heart monitor do that thing, and then eventually it gets smaller until it eventually just flatlines.
Yes.
And when Nolan flatlined, what I experienced was Mary Fran coming across the veil and scooping her
Oh
son
my
up
goodness.
out of his physical body.
Oh my goodness.
And
Sure.
and the two of them had this exquisite reunion, as you could only imagine, between a mother and son.
Wow.
And then I was I was actually surprised because I could feel what it is that they were feeling, and I was able to participate in that reunion. And then what surprised me even more was that the two of them then turned to me, came over, embraced me, and the three of us went to the light.
Wow.
Like, and I can tell you, Michelle, that was the most extraordinary experience.
Oh my gosh, I
This
just want to cry right now. That's just, it's such a beautiful story. Gosh. Wow.
and there we were, the three of us,
Sure.
and I'm what it felt like was like I had entered into this world of joy, of ecstasy, of forgiveness, of unity. You could feel like everything's connected to everything else,
Sure.
and all that was really interesting, except what really was important was the three of us were there, and we were able to communicate with one another. And we had a chance to um, affirm our love and affection for each other.
Yeah.
We had a chance to say a proper goodbye. I mean, if there is such a thing
Mm.
as a proper
Mhm.
goodbye. But, Mary Fran and Nolan were, coming home from sailing, and I was at work, so I wasn't anywhere near the accident.
Yes.
And so there was a chance to say goodbye. And then the three of us um, just had time to hang out and be with one another. And this is where I put in my plug for telepathic communication, because um, we didn't communicate in words, and thank God, because English is so restrictive on what words mean, and we don't have really good words for some of the things that I was experiencing. Um, but in that realm, you you get the whole thought with all of its nuances and all of its shades of color and meaning, and it's um, it's so much more profound and accurate that I was really grateful that I'd had that experience of not having to rely on a spoken language in order to communicate with two people that I cared deeply about. And then it just, at some point, it just felt complete. I mean, it
Wow.
wasn't like, Taylor, we're leaving you or something. It wasn't like that. It was just like, oh, we're done. This is
Yes.
this is good. We have closure. And then the two of them turned and went further into the light, and I returned back to my physical body sitting on the windowsill next to Willie, right over there. So that's like part A of the story. You got any questions, or you want me to keep going?
Oh, first of all, disclaimer, okay? Tell your publicist to let everybody know. Tissues. We all need tissues if you're going to interview you. Because my tissues are like over there, and I'm like, oh my God. But what a beautiful, beautiful story. Gosh. I mean, it's almost like as you explaining it, you're there. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you're just there, like it feels so blissful. Um, so
It was,
yes,
yeah.
question is, do you remember the time frame of how long that blissful experience happened? Was there any moment when you came back into your body where you went, did you sort of
Um,
just look around and go, wow, that just happened?
um,
A few questions in there, obviously.
that part of it, I'm guessing, eh, like 10 minutes
Yeah.
physical time.
Okay.
But when you enter into the light, time just doesn't make any
Yes.
sense anymore. It doesn't really exist the same way it does here. So, um, I felt like I was with them for a long time.
Yeah, and I'm so
And
sorry for your loss. I mean, wow, that's just sure
and
massive.
thank you. Um, and just to be clear, I'm since then I have married Anne. We're coming up on our 20th anniversary, and we have a wonderful, loving relationship. So it's
Yes,
I I get to have that in the physical world. I don't have to pine for it, because
yes, yes.
but
So
it
may
is
I
part
ask
of
you?
my past, and what it
Yes,
is that I was
yes.
feeling. Hmm.
So may I ask you with regards to the pining, the grieving, because you would have come back, as you explained, back into your body, your physical world. What then? What was the process then for you in that? Because 7 is so young. No one can. Did yeah, it's kind of like I'm speechless right now. I don't even know what to ask, which doesn't happen often.
I get
So
that.
enjoy this moment.
So let me go on to part B, because I think that will explain some of it.
Okay.
So when last I left you, I was in the light with Mary Fran and Nolan,
Yes.
and they went further into light, and I came back to my physical body. But that isn't the whole story, because um, while I was there with Mary, Fran, and Nolan, and my 100% of my consciousness is there with them in the light, and we're communicating back and forth. Back in the physical world, in the room with all of the other relatives, I was also 100% there.
Yes.
So now I have, I didn't know what to call it then. I do now. It's called bilocation, where I had a full consciousness in the light with Mary, Fran, and Nolan, and I was fully conscious in the room with the other relatives. And I know this because I'm sitting there on the windowsill, and it's like the love of the universe is inside me, and it's just bursting, trying to get out of me. And as a result, my face was just an expression of joy and ecstasy and love. And if anybody had looked at me at that moment, I'm positive they would have um, misinterpreted what was
For
going
sure.
on,
For sure.
because I got this big grin on my face, and I'm just so happy. It's
Yes.
just, oh my God,
Yes.
look at that. There
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah. Wow.
Um, and so I did the only thing I could think of, which was to take and cover my face with my hands,
Okay.
and just sit in that pose until things kind of settled down, and I returned, the other part of me returned back to my physical body, spend a little time getting myself together, and then I could, take my hands down and be with the grieving relatives, and hug and cry on each other's shoulders, and the things you do when you've just lost, the eldest grandchild in the family. And let's not forget that 6 days ago they lost, Mary Fran. So
Yes.
this was a double loss in very quick succession.
Massive.
And so it was it was a hard time to be in that room right then.
Sure. I can imagine.
So
Yeah.
that's part B. There's a part C when you're ready.
Go for it.
Okay. Um, so flash forward about 15 years, and I'm at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota. And the University of St. Thomas is the largest private university in Minnesota. And I'm doing my doctoral work there, on leadership. And I'm writing my dissertation on people who've had near death experiences and how that changes them, and how do
Was
they
that
live with it.
because of this experience that you had, or
Yeah.
was it part of? Oh, okay. So this it's like fast forward 15 years, but this is something that has been kind of like a niggle, a pull, a wondering, a
Yes.
questioning. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Mm.
And I got to that point where I needed to find people to interview that had had near death experiences, and I was having a hell of a time. I, here in the States, we have something called the HIPAA laws, which essentially assure private or patient privacy.
Okay.
So confidentially around it. So, I had been going to hospices, been going to hospitals, to nursing homes, asking if I could interview anybody who'd had a near death experience. And I kept running up to, like, well, we can't tell you who that is. That would be a violation of their
Okay.
privacy and the law. So we're not doing it. Like, oh, no. Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I did was to send a letter to the Randall women, because most of them were in the healthcare professions, and said, is there anybody that that would be willing to talk to me?
Mm.
Well, one of the sisters, who, by the way, wishes to remain anonymous, so I'm just going to call her the sister,
Okay.
um, wrote me back and said, Scott, I had a near death experience a couple years ago. And do you want to interview me? Well, heck yeah, sure. Yeah, let's do it.
Mm.
So we met, and you do all the things you're supposed. I had recording equipment and taking notes and the whole thing. And anyway, so she told me her story, which went like this. She was at her parents' house. She had taken a new medication and went to lie down to take a nap. And the next thing she knew, she was floating in this world of gray. And out of the gray came Mary Fran. And Mary Fran had her hands on her hips, and she walked right up to the sister and she said, "You've got to go back, and you've got to go back now." And the sister, who has a lovely sense of humor, looked at her and went, "Well, nice to see you too, Mary Fran. It's been a while."
That's awesome.
And not to be deterred, Mary Fran then drags out the waggy finger and goes, "I'm not kidding. You've got to go back, and you've got to go back now." And she said it with such force
Yes.
that the sister in her physical body jerked, opened up her eyes, and what she saw was the EMT, the
The paramedic.
emergency medical tech, had been over her, and he was turning away. And he says to his buddy who's standing next to him, he says, "I've done everything I could. I can't get her back. We've lost her." And
Wow.
of course, the one who's standing there is looking down, and he sees the sister with her eyes open up, and he goes, "Whoa!" Like, "Whoa, you did it!" And they, do their magic. They get her to the hospital, and everything's fine. She's still fine. Everything's great. So that's a really interesting story, and I got it all recorded, and I'm packing up my gear. And then this thought popped into my head, which was, so, sister, um, when Nolan made his transition, something really unusual happened to me. I wonder if anything unusual happened to you. And I'm looking at her, and her eyes get as big as saucers. Taking that as a yes, I turn back on my recorder and say, "I tell you what, you tell me your story first, then I'll tell you mine, and we'll compare notes." This
Mm-hmm.
is what she said. She said that, yes, she remembered that day very well. Said, and I know this because I was standing bedside by Nolan, and he said, "Scott, you were sitting on the windowsill next to Willie, right?" I said, "Yep, that's right." And she said, when Nolan flatlined, what she experienced was Mary Fran coming across the veil, scooping Nolan up out of his physical body. They had this exquisite reunion that she was able to participate in, meaning the sister, and that when that was done, Mary Fran and Nolan turned to her, embraced her, and the three of them went to the light, in which they were able to communicate, express their love for each other, and then she came back to her physical body.
Wow.
She used almost the identical words that I used in describing what happened to me.
Yes. Yes.
And in an instant, Michelle, if I had any doubts whatsoever that this had happened, and I had some because it's kind of an unusual thing,
Yes.
um, they just evaporated. The doubts evaporated.
Sure.
I had independent verification of exactly the same thing that had
Yeah.
happened to me. Now we know this as a shared death experience, and technically it's a multiple person shared death experience. There aren't very many, but there are
Wow.
some that are out there that are documented now.
Yes, it's the first
And
time I've heard of it too. Near-death experiences are very, I want to say, quite open, and more and more people are sharing them. But it's the first time I read about it when you speaking about it now. I had no idea. So, what was the point of reference? How come spirit do that? How come? was it an expansion of your consciousness to bring you to that awareness that there's more? And I'm getting goosebumps as I'm saying this to you. I'm like, oh, duh, Michelle, of course it is. But
Well, and it's we now know based on research that's been
yes.
done by William Peters, really interesting guy. He did a big study of shared death experiences, and a book came out last February called At Heaven's Door, where 800 people in his study. And what he said, and I now know it to be true, is that there's really kind of three conditions that are necessary for this to happen. First condition is that there is some sort of heart connection between the person making their transition, in this case, Nolan,
Mm-hmm.
and me. Um, so the backstory is Mary Fran was a single mother. The biological father disavowed any knowledge of his actions and left them high and dry.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't participate in their life, he didn't support them in any way, he just disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
So she was left to raise Nolan by herself. And as a consequence, she had made the decision that um, she was not going to tell Nolan who his biological father was. That just didn't seem right. And maybe someday, but not now, not when he's 7 years old.
Sure.
And so when I came into their life, I mean, he's going into second grade, and he wants a father just like every other second grader that's out there.
Yes.
And I was more than happy to play that role. That um, he's a great kid, and
I love how you said that, Scott. He's a great kid. You didn't say
he's
he was a great kid. He's a great kid because
he's a great kid.
he's still
Yeah.
around. He's just not in the physical. Wow.
So so that's the heart connection, that
Yeah.
he was looking at me like a father figure, and I um, was learning how to be that role, to be a father role. Anyway, so we were, working that out. But
Yes.
so first thing, heart connection. Second thing, you need to be kind of open and receptive, so you can't be actively grieving or, in conversation. You need to be kind of quiet.
Yes.
And that was certainly the case. I mean, I was just sitting on the windowsill, and all I was really doing was, watching the bouncing ball on the heart monitor. And so nothing was particularly going on with me. So I was in this relaxed and open state.
I
And the
love how
third
you,
thing that
I love that.
is the critical component
Yeah.
is that there needs to be an invitation from the person making the transition back into the physical world to pull that person through. So in my case, I was like double blessed. I had both Mary Fran and Nolan there
Yes.
who could reach across the veil and invite me into their transition. And
So tell
so
us,
that's kind of the rules, and like why some people have it and some people don't.
you like so that's unexplainable why some people have it. But do you think that with the research that's been done and the research that you've done, when you were standing on the side of the bed in those early hours of the morning, yourself and the one sister from what I can remember, and
Yep, Janie.
you had asked, to for Nolan for his mom to come back, and do you think that was a part of the opening, the heart opening, the awareness,
Isn't
where
that
she
interesting? I
clearly
never thought of
trusted?
it that way, that we had already preset that in motion, that
Yes,
Mary
because she
Fran would
clearly
come
trusted
and,
you. Yeah,
ooh, you're good at this, Michelle.
thank you.
After all this time, I never thought of that, really, that
Wow.
that we had kind of set that in motion, that we'd put that intent out there, that
Yes, yes,
that
because
Mary
that's,
Fran would come and help
well,
Nolan
from my
make his
own
transition.
Yeah, well, from my own shared experience as a mother who was a single mother many years ago, when I met my second husband, my little girl was 3, and for me, it's a real big trust for any person to come. It's a privilege to come into our space, and that might sound egotistical, but as a mother with a little girl, you want to know that you can trust the person like yourself who
Yep.
came to little Nolan's life. And that is an honoring of you, the way I see it. I mean, gosh, to have set that intention and for her to come back and include you just expands my heart. And I want to say this openly, my love for somebody like you, because that is like, you're the real deal, bud. It's like, whew.
Well, you and Mary Fran must be on the same wavelength because when we started dating, she said, she introduced me to her son Nolan and that sort of thing. She said, but um, I just need to let you know that I'm not going to invite you into our life until we're at a good spot.
Wow,
And okay,
incredible.
got to
What
prove
a,
myself.
yeah. You clearly are a good guy. But what
Jeez,
a
you got to hold it for so long. Yeah.
yeah, 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 look, it's not easy. Let's be very real. I mean, that's part of the human experience. My second husband, he was like, "Whoa, this is challenging."
This is intense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a true story. But my daughter was 3 and a half, and he's like, "How can she not wipe her own bum?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me? She's 3 and a half. Like it takes a process." But when we had our own son, he was like, "Okay, I now realize that this takes time." Yeah. So there is that human aspect of it. But honestly, all jokes aside, what a beautiful honoring to have been invited back into that beautiful space. And clearly, for me, the way I would look at that and interpret it is that she gave back to you what you had obviously given to her and her son to invite you into that next level of expandedness or consciousness. That's
Yeah.
gorgeous.
Isn't that
Wow.
nice?
That is,
Yeah.
yeah,
It was um, an honoring. I think that's a lovely word
yeah.
um, that she would like to say goodbye
Yes, yes.
and bring closure to
Yeah.
that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Scott, we need the tissues. Gosh. Yeah, that is just
I'm good.
beautiful.
I'm good.
Yeah, oh my goodness. Phew. Okay, where do we go from here? I don't even know.
Consequences.
Consequences. Okay, but hold on. I got to bring myself back. I'm like, whew. You have it in you, man, to just get us right in the heart. So I'm going to put up on the title today, bring tissues. um, okay, so where to from there? So you did all this research, and you had her wonderful sister come and share her experience, and I've heard about that so often where there's where spirit have just gone, no, it's not your time. It's not
Mm.
your time. Like whoever, the whether it be at the pearly gates or somebody out there is going, it's not your time. You got to go back. You got to go back. And I think some people get disappointed that they've got to come back because it's
Well,
pretty cool out there, isn't it?
yes, there are so many stories about people who come back and they wake up, say, like in the hospital bed, and there's a nurse by, and the nurse leans over and goes, oh, welcome back, Mr. Taylor. And, the person who is now back, they grab him by the shirt and go, why did you bring me back? It was so wonderful there.
It
Why,
is.
why, why?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It
there's
is.
that. And the flip side is I've had some wonderful conversations with people who wanted to stay. And, and then, St. Peter would go, no, it's not your time. You got to go back. And
Yeah.
then they, they get into an argument and there's negotiations about, well, if I got to go back, I should just tell you the story because it's remarkable actually.
Please do. Yes.
Um, so as as part of my 35 years of researching near-death experiences, I ran into Mary, and Mary was telling me about her near-death experience where she had lung cancer, and she had gone into the hospital and they were going to remove the cancer from her lungs, and she died on the operating table, lifted out of her body, and went to the light. And she said, Scott, I have to tell you, it was just so weird because I'm there at the pearly gates. It was just like in Sunday school. There's this big gate. There's St. Peter. He's got a lectern with a big old book on it. And I walk up and I go, hi, St. Peter, I'm here checking in. And he goes, and he flips through the pages and he goes, Mary, 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 you're not due here yet. No, you're going back.
Wow.
And she said, no, I'm not interested in that. This is a really wonderful place. Frankly, my body's full of pain back in the physical world. I don't really have a family I'm going to stay here. And St. Peter says, nope, you got to go back. And so the two of them, and I love this, she says, I just dug my heels into the cloud. I'm not going back. Like, really? Okay. So eventually what St. Peter said was, all right, I tell you what, you seem committed to this. Why don't I let you in on a temporary pass? And you can go in because your family's on the other side of the gate and they want to do a little catch up with you, if that's okay with you, but you have to be back here first thing in the morning.
Gosh.
Okay. So in she goes and she has this reunion with her dead relatives and they have a great time. She catches up on what everybody's doing. They catch up on her and it goes all night. Comes the next morning, she goes out to St. Peter, hands on hips, and goes, I had a wonderful time. I'm not going back. No way, no how. And St. Peter went, no, it's still the truth. It's still not your time. There's stuff you have to do back in the physical. So, and they get into it again.
Yes.
Finally, St. Peter says, tell you what, I'll give you another free pass. Only this time, you may want to go to the university center because I know you're really interested in, I forget what it was, history or something. And it says, we've got, this great historian who's going to give a speech tonight. I think you might like to attend. She says, yes. In she goes. Has a wonderful time walking around the university, attends the lecture, and attends another lecture. And they're, so she gets her head and then she goes back to visit the relatives again and hangs out with them for a while, comes back in the morning and they go through this thing. They argue, she goes in, they argue, she goes in. Anyway, so this happens for 6 days. On the 7th day, does this sound familiar? On the 7th day, she shows up at the lectern by St. Peter and she can tell, like, the energy had changed. And St. Peter looked at her and he goes, you're going back. And there was such a finality in his voice that it was like, oh,
I'm not negotiating.
It's really going to happen.
Yeah.
But Mary, not to be outdone, decides that she's going to negotiate her way back. So she tells him, you know what? I will go back peacefully, but you have to take the cancer out of my body because I'm not going back into that body that's full of cancer. You have got to do that. And St. Peter looks at her and he goes, Mary, you're right. Done. Next thing she knows, she's in the recovery room and she wakes up and the doctor who had done the surgery on her lungs is next to her and he's holding her hand. And he says, I'm sorry, Mary, but when I opened up your chest to take the cancer out of your lung, it had metastasized and it's all over your chest cavity. There was nothing I could do. And I'm just so sorry. Mary turns to him and says, "Nope, not true. There is no cancer in my body."
Wow.
And the doctor goes, thinking that she's still loopy from the anesthesia, says, "Well, I tell you what, why don't I come back a little later now and we'll talk about this?"
Yeah.
And Mary, still being her feisty self, said, "No, no, 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 no. I want you, you have to take a post op x ray, right?" I said, "Yes, I do." "Okay, let's take the x ray. You read it, then come back and talk to me." He says, "Fair enough. I'll do that." So later that afternoon, he walks in and he stands at the end of the bed and he has the x ray in his hand. And he goes, "I don't understand this, Mary. I had my hands in your chest. It was filled with cancer. And this x ray shows that there's no cancer in your body at all. It's all gone."
Wow.
And I'm sitting there and I'm getting all teary eyed. She's telling me this. I still do. It's remarkable.
Remarkable. Yeah.
And then Mary turns to me and she goes, "Damn, I wish I was a better negotiator." Like,
I would have
what?
done the same.
Hold it. You were up in heaven. You negotiated with St. Peter successfully for 7 days. You got to go to, museums and the university and hang out with your family. You had this wonderful time. And then you got St. Peter to take the can. What do you mean? How is it that you are not a good negotiator? And she said, "I asked him to take the cancer out of my body. He did that. What I neglected to do was to have him heal my body. The cancer was gone, but the damage the cancer had caused was still there."
Okay.
And so she had to, a lot of rehab and complications from the cancer leaving her body, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Wow.
But isn't that a wonderful story
Oh
about
gosh.
how all of this, it's um, even though they're divine beings, St. Peter, um, that we still have agency in the non-physical world,
Yes.
that we can ask for what we need,
Yes.
and if it works, then it can happen. So that was a really big lesson for me, that if we, especially in expanded states of consciousness, um, ask for what we need and be clear about what it is that we want, and then usually I throw in something like, that or something better, that those kinds of things can enter into our lives, either in the physical or the non-physical world. It gave me
Wow.
great hope, great joy. So
Is that why you look so young, Scott? You're like, just give me the youth. Just give me the
there
youth.
you go.
You've got direct access. I feel like you like put your hand out there and you're like, just bring it, guys. Just bring it. Yeah, because you probably have heard the most fascinating stories that just I'm sure your mind doesn't even get blown anymore, or does it still after all
Oh,
these?
all the time. Yeah.
Wow.
So what happened as a result of that experience with Mary Fran and Nolan was that I became intensely curious,
Hmm.
because I, well, driven too, I guess. I had been in that space with Mary Fran and Nolan, whatever that space is called. And it was so filled with joy and wonder and connection that I desperately wanted to go back there again.
Yes.
And so, for the next years, that's what I did. I tried to find ways to enter that space again. And I, I started out pretty simply. I said, well, okay, what I'm going to do is visit the ancient power centers, the ancient sacred sites on this world, and maybe there's a little juju there that will help, like push me up and propel me into that space, like it happened with Mary Fran and Nolan.
Yes.
So I went to Stonehenge and Machu Picchu and the pyramids and the Sphinx and the Oracle of Delphi, all these ancient sacred sites. And Michelle, it was just crickets.
I can just
Nothing.
imagine you like getting there and you're like, okay, I'm waiting. I'm waiting.
I'm here,
Like,
ready to
what
go.
the hell? Do you know how many months, how many months this has cost and how much money this has cost me?
However, I had fabulous vacations.
I'm
It's just
sure. I'm sure. Exactly. There's always a gift. There's always a gift
it's
in that
always a gift.
situation.
I was in more cathedrals than you could shake a stick at. Like, oh, nothing.
Funny. Funny, but
So
not funny.
funny,
So,
not funny.
what was your process?
So then I wound up saying, well, all right, well, clearly I need to do something else. So I said, okay, so I need to actively be able to go into these states of consciousness. There's people who've done this before me. So I studied with shamans in North
Okay.
and South America and over in Japan.
Wow.
I
Oh, the shamans in Japan. I didn't know
Oh
that.
yeah, oh yeah. The
Wow.
Emoto religion, there, it's a branch of Shinto that has um, they have a lovely saying, which is art is the mother of religion, meaning
Beautiful.
that when you practice art, you are using the same creative force as God used when God created the physical world.
Yes.
And
Wow.
so by doing art, you're doing that on a, what the hell,
Yes.
I'll give it
Yeah.
a whirl. And it was lovely. It was fabulous. But what wound up being the secret for me anyway, was that I started doing some meditation traditions. And I started with TM and I was okay. But what really worked for me was the meditation tradition at the Monroe Institute. They use binaural beats and it
Yeah.
helps you enter into and hold these states of expanded consciousness. And it was there that I was able to reconnect with Mary Fran and Nolan, and
Wow.
we have this relationship to this day. So
Incredible. It's
yeah,
amazing.
it's remarkable, and I wound up. It was so impactful for me that I wound up being a trainer for them for 35 years, and then for 2 years I was their executive director. I ran the place for a while, and
Incredible.
it was. And anyway, so that's what I do now. Is I took their methodology. Bob Monroe has a whole different cosmology in terms of what the non-physical world looks like than those people who've had near-death experiences. So I just took the framework that near-death experiencers use and applied the tools and techniques of the Monroe Institute plus a couple of my own. And son of a gun, I can
You got
I can
the
lead
formula.
people to those states. So if you want to, have an experience of the tunnel, for instance, we can take you there now. We know how to do that.
Wow.
And
So
so,
this is a question I did want to ask you, which is, what are the differences between the physical and the non-physical universes?
oh my.
Yes, because when you talk about the different states of consciousness, and uh, in my own experience of life, for me, it was letting go of the old, and that's why I so appreciated how you said when you were open in that space of openness in the hospital, when you were completely vulnerable. that's for me where I feel incredibly privileged when we allow our vulnerability. It's just it's pure, there's no other words. It's just pure, and it's kind of like our hearts just go, here we are.
Here we
Here
go. Yep.
and there's no filter, there's no judgment. And so that's been part of my huge journey, is letting go of my trauma, and I still am working through PTSD. So I wanted to ask you personally, for those who are watching this, um, does the binaural, I've loved listening to binaural beats, and but does it, because it's one thing being out there in the field, Scott, and it's wonderful and enlightened. But when we're back in our physical bodies, which I'm still exploring with, sometimes being a mother, being a wife, I'm back. And as a South African, a lot of people tell you South Africans are always on.
Yes.
And take the combination of me being, very passionate, as you can well hear, and fiery and on. So I've had to learn to work with my survival mechanisms, because I've just had quite a lot of being in survival in this lifetime. So coming to New Zealand, I'm still learning to settle my nervous system and that. And I know that meditation is very wonderful, being in nature is very wonderful. But take me down the tunnel. Take for anybody that, because there is I'm most certainly seeing in my field of work, a lot of people want to just check out at the moment. They want to have being in that space of leaving the physical body. And just in the last 2 weeks or so, I've seen quite a few beautiful, beautiful human beings that are just like, they've had such rapid change, and they're just like, it's easier. Let's just leave. Let's just go, and
Well,
and the
they're
way
right.
you've described it, it's kind of like, yeah, let's hold hands. Let's just jump, people. Let's go. So, what would you say to anybody, first of all, that is finding these times challenging?
I, I have the utmost respect for people that want to spend time checking out and seeing where it is that we're going and what the non-physical universe has for them, and what you know because here's what happens is that once we have gone up and we've touched that space and we find out what it's all about, what you realize in pretty quick order is that life here in the physical is an extraordinary gift. And even with its struggles, it is a priceless gift.
Yeah.
And it is about, we came here, we chose to
Yeah,
come into this
apparently.
world.
I know. Does that ever piss you off sometimes? Like, we chose to be here. We
We chose
created
to
this
be here.
reality. Really?
Like,
Sometimes I
there's
feel like
no freaking
negotiate
way.
with them.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
not only that, you chose to have that relationship. You chose to turn left instead of right,
Yes.
you know, and and so once we kind of get the hang of that we are here and we are choosing what it is that who we are and how we approach the world of the physical, it makes this life easier. It
Yes.
makes it more joyful. It makes accomplishing what it is that we want to have happen here, um, it makes it known to us.
Yes.
It's not a mystery anymore about how we can make our lives work better here in the physical world. Just a case in point, one of my first lessons when I was exploring the non-physical universe is that um, I learned that we live in a reactive world, meaning what we put out is what we get back. It's not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
So it all starts with us.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do we put out in our relationships? What do we put out into our physical world? How do we present ourselves? And that winds up being um, the ultimate act of responsibility. And the non-physical world responds to that and says, "This is what you're putting out. We're going to give you it back in kind."
Mm-hmm.
And it's a real awakening in terms of who we are as human beings, and what part of us do we choose to share with others.
Mm-hmm.
So back to your vulnerability point, um, I, it was another one of the surprises when I finally figured out that being vulnerable, people who are vulnerable are the strongest people in the world.
Wow.
This whole barrier, I'm going to be macho man, but they're the
Yes.
scaredy cats.
Yes.
You know, they're the ones that have to protect themselves and they protect their egos. And the ones that have said, I just, you know, come on in, let's share. And those are the ones who are really strong because they're so centered in who they are, and aren't invested in what other people think of them.
Yeah.
So, and then back to your question, which was, kind of, there's a couple of different things. I mean, when you're in the non-physical universe, linear time doesn't exist.
Yes.
So try to think of it in a way. It's really hard to wrap your head around the idea that time doesn't exist.
Yes.
So my story about that is, I have great respect for um, there's this debate about, was the earth created in 6 days or was the earth created over 4.5 billion years? And the answer is yes to both. And so the thought experiment goes like this. So you're a monk, you're on the mountaintop and you're meditating your brains out, and then one day, a guide comes along and says, I'm going to show you what the beginning of the physical universe looked like. And boom, it happens. And you get to watch it. But it happens outside of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going, this poor monk is coming down off the mountain going, I just saw the most remarkable thing. And then our mouth starts to move and no words come out because like, ah. And so they describe it in the only way they know how, using metaphors that are good for them,
Yeah.
but may not be an accurate representation of how things work outside of time.
Yes.
Because we don't have that conceptual framework here in the physical world where we see things as linear. And so that's when I have compassion for people who are trying to describe what happens in the non-physical world and put it into a framework that just doesn't quite fit. And
Yes.
they're doing the best they can.
Sure.
It's just, we I have a compassion for trying to put words to those kinds of experiences, because even as I describe what happened between Mary Fran and Nolan, it's just a pale version. That's of what happened, because
Of
so
course.
much of it we don't have good English words for.
Yes. And for me, you described it beautifully, absolutely beautifully. And it's like I said to you earlier on, it's kind of like we were like there with you, or I felt like I was there, but I know that it was your experience. And that for me is the beauty of being in a blissful, joyful space, and the openness of who we are as human beings. For me, is where absolute love resides, and I'm sure most of us always, like, I'm at this moment in my life questioning, like, what is actual love? But it's not tangible. We think it is. We're taught it's on the, like, if somebody makes you food and they, the other night I just made this chicken
Although
pie with
I
love.
do consider that as a form of love.
Of course. Yeah, of course. But you know what, it's That's the exciting part, though, of consciousness, and that everything is consciousness. Check, I can't even say it. Check my English language. Thanks for that, Scott. I can't get the word out. Consciousness, I got it. My dyslexic brain's kicking in today. But
So there's a story I'd like to tell about a personal search of mine,
yes,
which was back on this idea that we create our own experience in the physical world. We have a group of people that will help us craft our experience in the physical world.
yes,
So very often, people will say, well, Scott, when you go into the non-physical world, who is it that you would really like to have a conversation with? Because pick anybody.
yes.
And for me, I want to talk to Judas Iscariot. So those of you that are Christians know that he's the one that betrayed Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he wound up, dying on the cross as a result of that action. But think of it this way. So Jesus is in heaven and he's trying to arrange his life, right? He says, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to do this ministry, and for 3 years I'm blah blah blah. And then it comes to the point where Jesus can't be Jesus unless there's Judas that sets him on that path. So he looks around and he says, who wants to play that role?
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, it has to be Jesus's best friend, because it could only be someone who loved him that much that he would be willing to sacrifice himself and have 2,000 years of people angry at him always.
Yes.
But when you think of it from the non-physical perspective, that was a profound act of love that he did for Jesus. So when we take a look at our physical lives and go, why is it being really difficult right now? Why is everything so hard? What's the act of love that's behind that?
Mm.
And maybe we know now, maybe we have to wait until we make our transition to figure it out. But I think it gives, at least it has given me great solace to be able to say, yes, what happened really hurt. And there are gifts as a result of that learning that made me grow. And for that, I'm grateful.
Yeah.
So I think all of this has to do with gaining a new perspective about who we are as multidimensional beings, and
Yeah.
why we are here in the physical world.
Yes.
At least in my mind, we're here to grow, to love,
Yes.
and love takes all kinds of forms.
Yes.
And anyway,
As you said,
that
feeding you, that's the simple version, and that is, it's how we show up for each other. Often I just truly believe walking past somebody and smiling at somebody and saying hi, and even if the person's or saying thank you to the barista for genuinely putting effort into the coffee. Even if, could you imagine being a barista and making 100 to 200 coffees a day? And for me, it's those small little things, those of acts of kindness and compassion, and that's when we receive so much in return. Because it's
you want to
little.
blow somebody's mind? Try this someday. So you're at a fast food place and you're making your order for some sort of burger, and by rote, the person behind the counter says, would you like fries with that? Right? So they have to ask that, have been trained to ask that. And so your answer is, no, thank you, but I appreciate you asking me that question.
Oh, wow.
And
I
all of a
love.
sudden you could just, they have that visceral reaction, says,
Yes,
thank you for asking.
yes,
I appreciate that.
yes. Wow.
Because I might have wanted fries, but today I don't. That's okay.
Love that.
And
Yes,
it's like, oh, that was a gift to you, and,
yes,
and I'm just doing this rote I don't have to do it
Ah,
rotely. So
that's
anyway, try
fantastic.
that sometime when somebody asks you, do you want to supersize that? And you go, no, but thank you for asking.
Yes, yes. So simple, hey?
So
So
simple. And it
yeah.
blows people away. It's just
Yeah,
great.
because you're
So
actually showing that you care about that person in that moment. That just feels that they might be they might be just feeling like they are having a mundane job or a mundane routine, or who knows, that's an assumption even in that. But that's beautiful because that's appreciation. That's the energy that we want to move and give back to others continuously.
yep.
Speaking of which, binaural beats, I'm going to come back to that. Have you
Oh,
done lots of brain scans? I mean, I'm flicking the switch now. But have you done brain scans with regards to how binaural beats works for us?
yes. Um, I haven't done them personally, but I have been in the lab where that happened,
Yeah,
and have seen the scans. Um, and in particular, they're really interesting because when you do have all those things on there,
yeah,
um, there's a couple of things that happen. Well, first off, is that the brain. Let's take a simple example. Say they put 100 hertz into one ear and 104 hertz into the other ear. And the brain tries to equalize the two because that's what it's supposed to do. That's part of our echolocation thing.
yeah.
When we try to identify a sound in space, if it comes in from the side, it's a different tone than if it's on this side. So we move our head until the tones are equalized. That's what it's all about. So
Wow.
anyway, the brain does that. It sends the tones back and forth. It's saying, I've got 100, I've got 104, and it can't equalize them. So what the brain does is sets all by itself, it sets up a third tone, which is the difference between the two. So in this case, it was 4. And so, Michelle, if we were doing that right now, and I had you wear a headphone, your brain would start to vibrate at 4 hertz, and I'd put you to sleep because
Wow.
that's the frequency of deep sleep.
Okay.
Lovely. But something else happens, which is because the brain has keeps sending these signals back and forth. It does it really fast, and then all of a sudden the brain stops working as two hemispheres. It starts to work as one unit instead of two units. And so all of a sudden the brain now has at its disposal both conceptual and linear problem solving. So when information comes in from the non physical universe, it can interpret it in both ways in a more holistic way,
Yeah.
which means that we have a better understanding of what the um, non physical universe is trying to tell us.
Yes.
And there's another, the last thing is that they call it the frequency following response. So this 4 hertz starts, so then the whole brain starts to move at that 4 hertz. And the magic of Bob Monroe, he's the guy who developed binaural beat technology for meditation, is that he put them in layers. So you might have the tone in there that puts you to sleep, that 4 hertz that we were just, but then add another tone that would create a differential of 12.
Mm-hmm.
And 12 is mind awake. So you play both at the same time, and you have a condition called mind awake, body asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And that particular waveform, those waveforms, plural, working together allows us, well, that's the state Bob Monroe did all of his out of body work. So
Wow.
it put him into that state. He called it Focus 10, and it's a lovely state of expanded awareness where you could drop off the physical body and then go tool around as just a point of consciousness.
Wow.
So um, that's kind of binaural beat 101.
That's incredible. Thank you for explaining that. So that helps the body to settle at the same time, especially if we've had a lot of triggers and haven't felt safe. in our body, our physical body? Does that help a lot with that? Gosh, and I'm also just consciously aware of the time too, because you and I could probably chat for hours.
Yeah, we probably should go to
Yes.
dinner or something.
Yeah. You have a normal life, you know. Um, but I just to finish off, it's because I would love you to speak about your you've got some beautiful. I think those are them in the background, the beautiful CDs that you put together.
Oh yeah.
But is that part, and I'd love you to share that with the audience, but does the binaural beats help the body to settle with what you've just explained with regards to the sleep and awake and the sleep and awake? Does it bring the relaxed space and state, like if you really just want to get into a deep harmonious space, does that help the body to settle?
It it yeah, it really helps when we relax the body in such a way that it actually, goes to sleep. It kind of disappears. And so we don't have to worry about it when we're doing our meditation. It's kind of like we can now spend our time thinking about and experiencing what's coming in from the non-physical universe. I created 6 guided meditations that take us to different places on a near-death experience. It's meeting your guides. It's learning the skill of bilocation, like I described that
Yes.
happened for me. I'm up in the light and I'm down in the physical. It makes it really easy to explore. So yeah, so we meet our guides, we go through the tunnel, we have a reunion with our dead relatives. There's um, the life review, meeting divine beings, um, exploring um, they call it the park, which is that area of life between lives. It's like, where do we go when we're done with this life? Well, we hang out in an area that is affectionately called the park. And so, yeah, that's what those CDs do. And you practice them for a while, you get the hang of it, and you can go there on your own. It's lovely, and they're available at neardeathmeditations.com.
Awesome.
So
That was
thank you for that opportunity to do a commercial.
Yes, of course. Well, that's what it's about. We're all here to show up for one another, and any kind of tools that are out there that can help anybody. For me, that's the sharing, because sharing is caring, and if the more we care about each other, the more we show up for one another in the space of openness, how more beautiful can that be? And I learn so much from these wonderful connections, and it really is about the exploring of, there's so much out there. So meet your guys. I mean, guys, I can say to you, I have this on a continuous basis where people say, I just want to know that my guides are around. I just want to know, how do I meet them? So that's a beautiful way of getting to meet them, because they're always around, aren't they? They
Always
always
around.
have our
Oh
back.
yeah, and
Always.
most of us have so many. It's like, gee, Merry Christmas, fight them off. They're, they're
Yeah,
always
for
there to
me,
give
they
us
shift and they
helpful
change.
advice, and
Yes,
and depending upon what you need, you've got specialized guide to,
yes,
oh, you want, okay, let me
yes.
give you this hint. Okay.
I
So
know.
yeah.
So that's the fine tuning. That's the listening. Because often, and I'm gonna go back to your beautiful experience with um, you being at the bedside. But even that nurse for me felt like an absolute gift to yourself by saying the last sense to go is hearing. So that makes sense for anybody in a coma. I've heard before that the subconscious is always listening. Meanwhile, it's our beings, it's our light
Mhm.
that's always, isn't it? It's not always anything. It's not going anywhere. But I love that. So for those who are perhaps, showing up in hospitals and, are talking to loved ones, keep talking to them because they're listening. How beautiful is that? That's the fine tuning, I think, that happens in that
Yep.
moment. And it sounds like he listened. He
It was a
listened.
gift. It was a
Wow,
gift.
what a beautiful gift. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I am incredibly, incredibly honored for this wonderful Friday morning for me and Thursday afternoon for you. I couldn't have asked for a better way to start my day, Scott. And I'm so grateful, really and truly, for walking this journey. I know that you've got so much more else to share, and we haven't even touched on it, but your story is remarkable. Do you do one-on-one sessions with anybody, or can anybody connect with you on your website, or how are you working at the moment? I know you shared what you're doing.
Mostly, yes. Connect with me through my website, near-death-meditations.com, and I'm pretty good at responding quickly. And mostly what I do are classes where we enter into these meditative states that allow us to experience what near-death experiencers have described. So it's, honest to God, it's more fun than one person should have.
Nice. I was just going to say, give us a fun fact, and there you got it. Let's end up with something fun. There we go.
There we go.
Let's join your class. That sounds awesome. So, thank you, Scott, for being here today and keeping it real. And, guys, thank you for sharing this wonderful experience with us. And as you can well hear, I say this probably every week, but I always feel like my cheeks are so sore from just smiling at my guests. And I really am incredibly grateful that you are here today. So, guys, thank you. Please comment, please share with us what your feelings are, if you have any questions. And I look forward to seeing you all again on Keeping It Real. And remember, from me, love is why we are here. I love you all. Bye.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome. I'm going,
Back at you.
I don't even know where to stop this. Hold on, where's my recording button? There we go. I'm so not, there we go.